AITA for refusing to share my stepson's $3.7 million app earnings with my wife who abandoned him. When I saw her walk into the mediation room, I felt like someone was squeezing my windpipe from the inside. Stiletto heels, an expensive handbag, her hair pulled back in a perfect bun, as if she were heading to a photo shoot, not to claim money from the son she had left with a note taped to the fridge. Evan was beside me, his hands shoved into the pockets of his sweatshirt. His headphones were hanging around his neck, and his gaze was fixed on the table, tracing the grain of the wood with a finger, over and over. That was his way of staying calm. I knew that inside, he was at war. She sat across from us, so self-assured, flanked by a man in a gray suit and a navy tie. The lawyer took out a leather folder, placed it in front of him, and did not even glance at Evan. "Good morning," he said. "Let's try to resolve this amicably." This is what they called it when the woman who had disappeared 11 years ago now wanted a piece of a $3.7 million app, created by the child she had left behind without a backward glance. Our lawyer, Grant, leaned toward me in his chair and whispered, "Marcus, remember what we discussed. Legally, we could lose." I felt my ears grow hot, and my palms began to sweat. I loosened the knot of the cheap tie I had put on because Evan said today was an important day. Honestly, I would have come in jeans. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but I felt a small tug on my sleeve. Evan leaned just close enough for only me to hear him. "Dad?" he whispered without looking at me. "Just let her talk." His voice was calm, far too calm for a 17-year-old facing the woman who had abandoned him. I nodded slowly. "Okay, let her talk." I took a deep breath and clung to the blue folder where I kept all the documents from these past years as if it were a life raft. And as she crossed her legs and smiled as if this were just a misunderstanding between reasonable adults, I realized that in the end, it would all come down to that, letting the sound of her own voice give her away. "My name is Marcus. I am 45, and I live in Portland, Oregon. I am a freelance IT consultant, which means I spend half my life fixing computers that people swear they did not touch at all, and the other half battling QuickBooks and the IRS. For 11 years, it also meant something else. Every invoice, every extra weekend job, and every sleepless night was for Evan. Evan is not my biological son. He is my stepson. I met him when he was 6, right after he had been diagnosed with autism. I was 34 then, renting a tiny apartment in the Hawthorne district, and thinking my biggest worry was whether a client's laptop was completely fried or could still be saved. I met Kristen, yes, the one from the mediation room, in a continuing education course on spreadsheets that a corporate client forced me to attend. She sat next to me, complained about the lukewarm coffee, laughed at my flannel shirt, and asked for help with a pivot table. 3 months later, I was assembling Wayfair furniture in the apartment she shared with her son. The first thing that made me fall in love with Evan was how he lined up his Hot Wheels cars by color, not by size. The second was how he recited the schedules for the Max Blue line from memory. The third was that when I sat beside him without speaking, he simply slid a blue car toward me. No words were exchanged, but for me, it was a quiet invitation. "I'm letting you in a little." What I did not see, or did not want to see, was the way Kristen looked at money. I earned more than she did. She worked part-time at a department store and was always exhausted. She had debt from an old credit card, a car loan, and, according to her, an ex who did not pay what he owed in child support. And like a good, lovesick fool, I started to help. First, it was paying an overdue electricity bill, then the rent 1 month when things piled up. Then Evan's private school tuition, speech therapy, and occupational therapy. I do it all with pleasure, I would tell myself. This is our family, I would repeat. It was true, but the one pulling out the credit card was always me. When we got married at the county courthouse, Evan held my hand so tightly that I could barely sign the license. Kristen cried. The justice of the peace smiled, and I thought that scene would last me a lifetime as a happy memory. In reality, what stuck with me was another scene. A few years later, Evan had just turned 8 when Kristen left. On a typical Tuesday, I came back from a service call around 8 p.m. My back was aching, and I smelled of old office dust. I found the apartment door ajar, the living room in disarray, and our bedroom closet half empty. Evan was sitting on the kitchen floor with his headphones on, staring intently at the fridge. On the door was a pink post-it note. "Marcus, I can't do this anymore. I need to live my life. You know how difficult Evan is. I'm leaving the keys." I've gone with Tyler. Don't call me. Tyler, the 24-year-old bartender from the place downstairs. The one with the sleeve tattoos and the motorcycle that made more noise than it had power. The younger lover, as my sister later called him with a sneer. I remember my hands trembling so much I had to read the note 3 times. Evan glanced at me, took off one headphone, and said simply, "Mom did not come." I swallowed hard. I did not cry. Not then. I stroked his hair and said the only thing I could think of. "But you and I are here, okay? And that is not going to change." The next day, I called the school, the therapist, and the bank. I filed a report with Child Protective Services to document the abandonment. I went to family court. Nobody could find Kristen. For months, all we got were sporadic messages from her, asking for money. "Marcus, send me $500. Tyler lost his job. Can you pay my cell phone bill? Otherwise, they will cut it off. You know I can't work with my anxiety. Help me out a little." At first, I sent it. It hurt, but I thought she would somehow still be Evan's mother, that she would come back, that she was just lost. Then came the message that changed everything. "I already did my 6 years. Now it's your turn. Stop bugging me about the kid." That day, I stopped sending her a single cent. Evan and I managed as best we could. I moved to a cheaper apartment. I bought secondhand furniture. I put a board with Velcro in the living room so he could organize his routines with pictures. I adjusted my client's schedule around his therapy sessions. My parents helped out some afternoons. My friends gradually disappeared. Not all of them, but the ones who could not understand why I never went out anymore. The years passed. No visits, no birthday presents, no messages asking how my son was. Just the occasional, "Hey, do you still have that big TV?" No. And yet, when the news started reporting that a 17-year-old from Portland had created a revolutionary app to help autistic youth communicate, she appeared. Evan's app was born on the kitchen table between unwashed dishes and a laptop covered in stickers. He had always been fascinated by computers. As a child, while other kids played baseball, he would copy commands from YouTube tutorials and make lists of his favorite keyboard shortcuts. When he started high school, a technology teacher saw him programming small things in Scratch and told me, "Your kid sees the world differently. With the right support, that could be gold." I was not thinking about gold. I was thinking that Evan finally had something that made him feel competent. At 15, he learned Python. By 16, he already knew more than I did, and I make a living from this. He created small bots to organize his day, visual reminders. One afternoon, leaving a session with his psychologist, he told me in the car, "A lot of kids do not talk, but they do write or press buttons. It could be easier." That is where it all began. A project first called Little Buttons that later transformed into Claros, an app that allowed users to create customizable communication boards with pictograms, text, synthetic voice, and statistics for professionals, all tailored to each individual. It was not magic. It was sleepless nights, failed tests, and betas full of bugs. I would bring him sandwiches to his desk, remind him to shower, and set alarms to make him sleep. He would get angry when the code did not work. He would turn off the screen, go to the balcony to rock in his chair, come back, and try again. At 17, a tech blog interviewed him. Then another. A local tech incubator offered him a small space, mentorship, and an investor contact. The whole thing exploded in a matter of months. A venture capital fund valued the project at $3.7 million in a preliminary round. These were numbers on paper, stocks, shares, things I did not fully understand myself. I only knew one thing. For the first time in his life, Evan had something the world considered valuable. One Saturday morning, while I was in line at Trader Joe's, my friend Jessica from college, who was still on my Facebook, called me. "Marcus, have you seen this?" She sent me a screenshot. It was Kristen's Instagram profile. I had not seen her in 11 years. There she was, filters, motivational quotes in large letters over a photo of the blog article. Proud to be the mother of the genius who created Claros. Talent is inherited. I felt my stomach drop to my knees. I left the shopping cart where it was and had to step outside for a moment to breathe. 2 weeks later, a process server showed up at our door with a court summons. The petition stated that Kristen, Evan's biological mother and legal parent, was requesting to be named co-conservator of his estate, alleging that her son did not have the full capacity to manage large sums of money due to his condition. My cheeks burned when I read that. For her to use Evan's autism as a legal tool, after she had fled precisely because of it, seemed so low I did not even know how to react. Can she do that? I asked Grant the first time we met in his office, a small place with old file cabinets and a coffee maker that was always on. Grant sighed. She can try? Unfortunately, yes. You are Evan's legal guardian, but she is still his mother on paper. He threw up his hands. The fact that she abandoned him is not documented as a formal termination of parental rights. There was no court ruling. She just left. The messages help, but they are not the same as a CPS file that ends in a custody removal. And since there is money involved and Evan is a minor, the court is very careful. I will be straight with you. We could lose. I slept terribly that night. I thought about frozen accounts, about Kristen managing the company, about Evan having to ask for permission to use his own money. I imagined Tyler, the bartender, back in our living room, sprawled on the couch with a beer, talking about our millions. The next morning, as Evan was eating cereal straight from the box, I told him, "Mom wants your money," I summarized, because with Evan, things have always worked better when I do not sugarcoat them. He stopped chewing. He looked at me for a second and then back at the box. "My money is not just mine," he said slowly. "It is for the project, for the users. But it is not hers either." "What is not?" "She is not a part of it." Silence. Then he added, "We can protect it." "That is what I am trying to do, son." "No, Dad. Legally." And that is when I realized that while I had been counting cables and invoices, he had been reading about foundations, trusts, and obscure legal structures on the forums he frequented. A week before the mediation with Kristen, we made the move that changed everything. We went to Grant's office. Evan was wearing his favorite gray sweatshirt, the one with a blue paint stain that will never wash out. In his backpack was his laptop. Grant, acting as the legal counsel for the formation, spoke to him slowly and clearly, as if explaining the rules of a new game. I appreciated that detail. "Are you sure," Grant asked, "that you want your entire stake in the company to be transferred to this irrevocable trust you have created?" Evan nodded. He does not like open-ended questions, so Grant had prepared everything with yes/no options. "And you agree to have your father, Marcus, as the temporary trustee until you turn 21, without the ability to withdraw money for himself, only for your needs and the project's needs?" Another nod. I swallowed hard. Signing that was like shooting myself in the foot if I ever needed that money for something of my own. But it also cut off Kristen's main argument at the root, that I was taking advantage of the child's assets. Grant slid another paper toward me. "This is your commitment, waiving any personal benefit from the shares, beyond a reasonable salary if you work formally for the company," he explained. I signed, my hand trembling, but my decision firm. That was my line in the sand. For 11 years, I had paid, given in, waited, and endured. From that moment on, Evan's money would belong to Evan and his project. Not mine, not Kristen's, not anyone's. We left the office, got a slice of pizza at a place downtown, and Evan, without looking up from his phone, mumbled, "This is not to punish you, okay?" I almost laughed. "I know, champ. It is to protect you. And the app," he added seriously. He was right. And so we arrived at the mediation room. Kristen began speaking softly, with that voice I remembered from the last time she asked me for money. "Look, Marcus, Evan," she said with a fake smile. "Nobody here wants to hurt anyone. I just want what is fair. I brought him into this world. I have suffered a lot. You have no idea what I have been through." Evan kept looking at the table. I clenched my teeth. Her lawyer opened his folder and began his prepared speech. "My client believes that as the mother, and given her son's special characteristics, she has the right to participate in the management and profits, especially considering that Mr. Marcus is not the biological parent and could." Could what? I cut him off, my voice more controlled than I felt. Steal from him? Manipulate him? The man held up his hands. "I did not say that." Kristen intervened. "Look, Marcus, do not be so dramatic. I know you have been with him all these years, but I am his mother, and it does not seem fair for me to be left with nothing now that this is worth millions. Do you not see what the papers are saying?" There it was. Left with nothing. Grant touched my arm, a signal to let him handle it. But before he could speak, it was Evan who lifted his head. For the first time in the entire meeting, he looked at his mother. He looked directly at her. I realized she was not used to that gaze because she shifted in her chair. "How many years?" Evan asked, articulating each word. Kristen frowned. Evan, sweetie, I do not understand. How many years without seeing you? He insisted. Well, that is not relevant right now. 11, he answered himself. Almost 11. He reached into his backpack, took out his phone, and with precise movements, opened a folder. I have counted the days, he added, and the messages. Grant cleared his throat. Evan wanted to bring some evidence. He explained, looking at her lawyer. Text messages, emails, notifications. He placed the phone in the center of the table and turned on a recorder and speaker. Grant had already printed them out and submitted them as part of our discovery, but hearing Kristen's voice from that audio message was something else. I already did my 6 years. Now it's your turn. I can't handle a kid like that. It's too much for me. Marcus, stop sending me pictures. It stresses me out. Just deal with it. Kristen's face changed color. Her lawyer, uncomfortable, cleared his throat. Those messages are taken out of context, she said quickly. I was in a bad place. Tyler was manipulating me. I was not at my best. Evan turned off the audio and went back to tracing the wood grain on the table, as if resetting something in his head. When I am programming, he said slowly, if a module has an error, I always remove it from the system. It does not matter if it was nice before. All that matters is whether it works or not. Absolute silence. No one said anything for several seconds. Grant glanced at me as if to say, let him go, let him continue. Kristen leaned back in her chair. This is manipulation, she snapped. You have filled his head with nonsense. He is a child. He does not know what he is saying. He is sick. The word sick bounced around the room like a stone. I felt Evan tense up beside me. He hates it when people say that. He did not react with a tantrum like when he was little. He just said, I am autistic, not sick. And I am not your excuse. Her lawyer tried again, with less confidence now. Evan, I understand you are angry, but your mother just wants to help you. No, he cut him off. She just wants money. He said it with a calmness that made me ashamed of my own lack of it. The mediation ended without an agreement. She wanted a percentage, a seat on the board, a salary. We offered something symbolic. To settle, if the judge ordered it, a portion of the back child support she never paid in the form of a donation to an autism nonprofit, so at least something good would come of all this. She laughed in my face. A nonprofit? I am not a bad mother, Marcus, and I am not accepting crumbs. It was ironic. 11 years ago, she left her son with a post-it note, but now she would not accept crumbs. The trial was a circus, but a slow one. It took months for the date to arrive. During that time, my family was divided. My mother, who had never been able to stand Kristen, supported me without reservation. My sister, however, called me one day to say, look, Marcus, maybe you are taking this too far. In the end, she is his mother. Could you not reach an agreement? Even just 10%, something. Family is family. I was in the kitchen with a pile of empty Tupperware containers on the counter. Family, I replied, is who stays when everything falls apart, not who takes off on a motorcycle with some 20-something kid and leaves notes on the fridge. Do not be so resentful. I smiled without any humor. I am not resentful, Jessica. I am responsible. And this time, Evan's money is only going to be used for Evan, not for Kristen to buy handbags. I hung up. I did not argue anymore. That was my boundary with them, too. Whoever understood, great. Whoever did not could step aside. The night before the trial, Evan was in the living room, adjusting code on his laptop. The TV was on with the sound off. On the coffee table was the suit we had borrowed for him because I could not afford a new one. Are you nervous? I asked. No, just tired. If you freeze up tomorrow, if you get overwhelmed, if you need to leave, we will go. Okay. The money is not worth as much as you being okay. He nodded without looking up. Tomorrow, all she needs to do is talk, he repeated. The rest is already in the documents. And he was right. At the trial, Kristen sank herself. Her lawyer tried to portray her as a grieving mother, a victim of her own immaturity, someone who had no support, and that is why she fled. They showed recent photos of her with captions like, learning to love myself. They talked about mental health, about second chances. But every time she opened her mouth without a script, the truth slipped out. I was very young. I did not want to give up my life. I put up with it for 6 years. That is enough. I have always been very sensitive. I could not handle his meltdowns. Marcus, yes, he is colder. So now I do not have the right to enjoy anything? I have been struggling financially for years while he got to keep the child and everything. Each sentence was registered in the mind of the judge, a woman in her 50s with red-framed glasses who made no effort to hide her expressions. When it was our turn, Grant was methodical. He showed the printed text messages, the school records showing the mother's absences, and the reports from therapists who only knew Marcus, the father, because the mother had never attended a single session. He showed the documentation for Evan's trust, which stated that I waived any personal financial benefit from the shares. My client did not come here to protect his own wallet, Grant said. He came to protect his son's, and above all, his stability. The judge looked at us. I want to hear from Evan, she said. I tensed. We had discussed this possibility. Evan stood up, walked slowly to the stand, and took a deep breath. He did what he does best. He reduced the complex to something simple. I have plans, he said. Plans for the app, plans to continue my studies, plans to live in an apartment with few bright lights and quiet neighbors. My plans do not include Kristen, and they do not need her money. The judge nodded slowly. From her seat, Kristen let out a scoff. You have brainwashed him, she said. If it were up to me, he would already be in Silicon Valley making the most of all this, not locked up at home like some weirdo. A silence fell over the room, the kind you could cut with a knife. Her lawyer tried to touch her arm, but it was too late. Just let her talk, Evan had said. He knew that at some point, she would show her true colors. The verdict came a month later. I was at work, replacing the hard drive on a laptop that looked like it belonged in a museum, when my phone rang. It was Grant. I will read you the important part, he said, without any preamble. The biological mother's petition to be named co-conservator is dismissed in its entirety. The court confirms that the guardianship you exercise is appropriate, that Evan has sufficient capacity with support to make decisions about his assets, and that there are no signs of mismanagement. And get this, they are ordering Kristen to pay your court costs and attorney's fees due to filing a frivolous lawsuit. I had to sit down on a cardboard box. Frivolous. Translation. The court believes she came here to cash in without a solid case, taking advantage of her son's condition. And they did not like that at all. I did not cry. I laughed, but out of sheer exhaustion. Can she appeal? She can, Grant sighed. But with this ruling, it will be difficult, and most of all, expensive. I hung up. I sat there for a while, staring at a screw in my hand, not knowing where it came from. Then I called Evan. We won, I told him. I already knew we were going to win. He replied as if I had just told him the sun had come up. Why? Because she does not learn. And sometimes, the system does. That night, Kristen wrote on Facebook that the justice system was corrupt and that a mother had been punished for making mistakes. Jessica showed it to me in a screenshot. I just replied, block her. We do not need to know what she says anymore. And so we did. Then came the less dramatic part, the calls from family, the messages, I just wanted to understand your side of it. My Uncle Rick showed up one Sunday with a six-pack of craft beer and a prepared speech. Look, Marcus, we all know Kristen was not right, but to leave her with nothing. You could have at least offered her a job at the company, something symbolic. I poured him a glass and answered calmly. I am not putting someone who called my son a kid like that and a weirdo in his company. I am not going to finance a person who disappeared for 11 years and only came back when she heard the word millions. You are being resentful. I am being busy, I corrected. Raising Evan. That is what I have done for 11 years. That is what I will keep doing, only now, without anyone coming to charge an admission fee. Some people stopped calling me. Others, curiously, grew closer. The mother of one of Evan's friends stopped me outside the high school. I admire you, she said. Not just for the app, but for not letting them steal what is his. Not all of us have the courage to say enough is enough. I did not feel brave. I felt tired, but I appreciated the words. Kristen tried to appeal, then gave up when she saw her own lawyer's quote to continue. For a while, I would get notifications that she had tried to tag Evan on social media. He had her blocked everywhere. Eventually, the noise faded away. One Tuesday afternoon, I received her last message from an unknown number. One day, Evan will thank me for what I tried to do for him. You are pushing him away from his real family. When he needs me, I will be here. And you, without his money, would be nobody. I read it once. I deleted it. Then I deleted the number. I did not reply. I am not your bank, I thought. I am not your safety net. I am not the guy who pays the bill when you burn the house down. Now, when I think about closure, I do not think about the day of the trial or the verdict. I think of a very simple scene. A few weeks later, it was a Sunday night, and we were at home. We had made homemade pizza with supermarket dough and way too much mozzarella, and the living room smelled of tomato and burnt wires because Evan had left a charger plugged in improperly. On the dining room table, there were three things: Evan's open laptop with the new version of the app, a brown folder with a copy of the verdict, and an old shoebox. "What is that?" I asked, pointing to the box. "I found it in the storage unit," Evan said. "It has pictures." I opened it. They were photos from when he was little. Some with me, others with Kristen. One of the few where all three of us appeared together. Evan in the middle with huge headphones on. Me on one side, looking like I did not know what to do with my hands. Kristen on the other, smiling at the camera. "We can throw them out," I said, "if you want." Evan shook his head. "Not all of them." He started sorting through them. He set aside the blurry ones, the ones from parties where he was not even in the picture. He kept three. These stay, he decided. One was of him at 5 years old, alone, looking at a fish tank. Another was of the two of us with ice cream at the coast. The third, curiously, was the one of the three of us together. "Are you sure about that one?" I asked. "Yes. It is proof that it existed. I do not need more." He took a black marker and wrote on the lid of the box in his uneven handwriting, "Things that happened, but do not rule anymore." We put the rest of the photos inside. He closed the box and carried it to the top shelf of the hallway closet. He came back, sat down in front of his laptop, and continued programming as if nothing had happened. I poured myself a glass of water, sat on the couch, and looked at him and the folder with the verdict. I thought about the 11 years of bills, therapy sessions, sleepless nights, meltdowns, tight hugs, and the first "I love you" spoken in his own way. At the table, there were 2 empty chairs, as always, the ones that would remain empty for anyone who wanted to come back only when they smelled money. Evan turned the screen toward me. "Look, I have added a new module," he said, "so users can log when someone makes them feel safe." "And what is the button called?" I asked. He smiled, barely, that half smile that takes a while to appear but fills the whole room when it does. "Home," he replied. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that this was finally the place we were always meant to be. In a house where there is no admission fee, where post-it notes are not for goodbyes, and where money does not decide who is family and who is not. Just us. And this time, that was enough. Comment: I believe true family is not defined by blood, but by the people who consistently show up with love and support. Learning to set firm boundaries is one of the greatest acts of self-respect we can practice, both for ourselves and for those we protect. Sometimes, the wisest move is to step back and allow the truth to reveal itself without getting drawn into the chaos. True responsibility is a quiet, daily commitment, not a loud claim made when there is something to gain. Healing does not always mean forgetting the past, but rather deciding that it no longer has power over your present. We can extend kindness to others while still fiercely protecting our own peace. Each of us has the power to define what home means, creating a sanctuary built on trust and safety. What you build with integrity and love will always be more valuable than what anyone tries to claim from you. I hope you always remember to protect your peace and honor the people who truly show up for you. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.